The alarm screamed through the research station like a dying animal. Commander Sarah Chen's coffee mug shattered against the metal floor as the emergency lights bathed everything in hellish red. Contact protocol initiated, the station's AI announced, with unnatural calm. Unknown vessel approaching, estimated arrival 12 minutes. Sarah's hands flew across the holographic displays, her heart hammering against her ribs. In 30 years of deep space research, she'd never seen readings like these. The ship approaching their remote station wasn't just massive, it was impossible. Energy signatures that defied every law of physics they knew. Hull composition that registered as both solid matter and pure energy simultaneously. Dr. Martinez, get to the communication array, she barked at the station's xenobiologist. Professor Kim, prep the translation protocols, everyone else emergency stations, and for God's sake someone turn off that alarm. The screaming stopped, leaving only the hum of life support and the thunder of Sarah's pulse in her ears. Through the observation deck's reinforced windows, space itself seemed to bend. Reality twisted like heated metal as something the size of a small moon materialized from nowhere. The vessel, if it could be called that, looked like a living thing. Its surface rippled with patterns that hurt to look at directly, shifting between geometries that shouldn't exist. Commander? Dr. Elena Martinez's voice cracked from the communication station. They're trying to talk to us. The sound that filled the station wasn't quite language, it was deeper than whale song, more complex than any human speech. It resonated in their bones, made their teeth ache, and somehow, impossibly, Sarah understood fragments of meaning. Safe harbor, young ones, trust, protection. Are you getting this? She whispered to Professor Kim, the station's linguistics expert. The elderly Korean scientist nodded, his face pale but determined. It's not just communication, Commander. It's emotional transmission. They're not just talking, they're sharing feelings, concepts, entire thoughts. The alien song continued, and with it came images that bloomed directly in their minds. Star systems burning, worlds cracking apart like eggs, a species fleeing across the galaxy, carrying something precious beyond measure. And then, cutting through the cosmic symphony, came a sound that made every human on the station freeze. It was crying, the unmistakable sound of children weeping. My God, Elena breathed. They have children aboard. The alien vessel shifted, and a smaller craft detached from its hull. As it approached their station, the emotional transmission intensified. Desperation crashed over them like a wave. These beings, these impossibly advanced entities, were terrified. But not for themselves, for their young. Sarah's training kicked in. First contact protocols, diplomatic procedures, safety measures. All of it fell away as she stared at the approaching craft. Whatever these beings were, wherever they'd come from, they were parents. And they were asking for help. Open the docking bay, she ordered. Commander, that violates. Open it. The smaller vessel, smooth as liquid mercury but somehow solid, settled into their docking bay with impossible grace. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the craft's surface simply dissolved, revealing the interior. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The being that emerged was nothing like the monsters of Earth's fiction. It stood nearly 8 feet tall, its form shifting subtly between states, sometimes solid, sometimes translucent, always beautiful in a way that made her eyes water. Its skin, if it could be called skin, held the depth of deep space, scattered, with points of light that pulsed like stars being born, but it wasn't alone. Behind it, clinging to what might have been robes that flowed like liquid starlight, were 3 smaller beings. Children, unmistakably despite their alien nature. They pressed close to their guardian, their own star-scattered forms dimmer, more fragile. The adult being looked directly at Sarah, and when it spoke, the words formed in her mind with crystalline clarity. We are the Kethmori. We are the last, and we need your help. The station's sensors screamed warnings as more ships began materializing around them. Hundreds of them. Thousands. An entire civilization compressed into a fleet of impossible vessels, all converging on their tiny research station in the depths of interstellar space. "We know what you are," the being continued, its mental voice carrying layers of meaning that human language couldn't capture. "We have watched your species from afar, studied your nature, and we know what others do not." Sarah found her voice. What do you know?" The Kethmori's form shimmered, and, for a moment, she saw it as it truly was, a being of such power and complexity that her human mind could barely process it. Stars lived and died in its presence. Gravity bent to its will. It could reshape matter with a thought, travel between dimensions, command forces that could crack planets. But its children, its precious, fragile children, huddled behind it like any youngster seeking protection. "We know," it said, "that among all the species of the galaxy, only humans have never harmed the young of another race." The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. In all their expansion across the stars, through all their wars and conflicts, humanity had maintained one unbroken rule. Children were sacred, all children, even the offspring of their enemies. "The hunters come," the Kethmori continued, and Sarah felt the terror that accompanied those words. "They consume worlds, they corrupt realities, they turn children into weapons. We have power beyond your understanding, but we cannot fight and protect our young simultaneously." Through the station's windows, Sarah could see more of the massive ships. Each one carried thousands of the Kethmori, and if their cultural scans were accurate, nearly half of those aboard were children. "You want us to," she began. "We want you to do what your species has always done," the being replied. "Protect the young. Guard them while we face the hunters. Keep them safe until we can return." The request was impossible. Insane. The research station couldn't possibly accommodate thousands of alien children. They had no facilities, no understanding of Kethmori biology, no idea how to care for beings whose very existence defied physics. But as Sarah looked at the three small forms clinging to their guardian, as she felt the desperate love radiating from the adult Kethmori, she knew what her answer would be. "How long?" she asked. "We do not know. The hunters are relentless. The battle may last cycles, but we will return for them. We swear this by the light of dying stars." Sarah took a deep breath, thinking of her own daughter back on Earth, thinking of every human parent who had ever faced impossible odds to protect their child. "We'll find a way," she said. "We'll keep them safe." The Kethmori's form brightened, and Sarah felt gratitude so intense it brought tears to her eyes. But beneath the relief, she sensed something else. Something the being hadn't told them about. The hunters. Something that made even the godlike Kethmori afraid. As the first group of alien children began transferring to the station, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just committed humanity to something far more dangerous than she could possibly imagine. The real question wasn't whether they could protect the Kethmori young. The question was whether the hunters would be content to let them try. Chapter 2. The Guardian's 3 weeks had passed since the Kethmori fleet departed, and Research Station Epsilon had transformed into something unrecognizable. What had once been a sterile scientific outpost now resembled a cosmic nursery, filled with the sounds of otherworldly children at play. Dr. Elena Martinez watched from the observation deck as young Kethmori floated through the modified habitat. Modules, their star-flecked forms leaving trails of gentle light. They'd learned to control their more reality-bending abilities around the humans, but occasionally one would forget and accidentally phase through a wall or briefly exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "Status report," Commander Chen said, joining Elena at the viewing window. "Better than we had any right to expect," Elena replied, updating her holographic display. "We're housing 847 young Kethmori across 15 modified modules. The food synthesis problems were solved once we figured out they literally eat starlight. Concentrated solar radiation does the trick. Medical concerns are minimal since they seem to exist in a state of controlled energy fluctuation rather than traditional biology." Sarah nodded, but her expression remained troubled. And the modifications to their caretakers? Elena's smile faded. That was the part that still made her uncomfortable. The adult Kethmori had left behind 12 of their kind, volunteers who would remain to help translate cultural and physical needs. But the process of communication required what they called neural harmonization. The Kethmori caretakers had to adjust our brain chemistry, Elena admitted. Nothing permanent, they assured us. But we can now perceive their emotional communications directly. Sometimes I dream in their language. Through the transparent aluminum windows, they could see Dr. Yuki Tanaka playing some kind of game with a group of young Kethmori. The children's forms shifted between solid and translucent as they moved, and Yuki was laughing despite the fact that she was clearly losing whatever contest they were engaged in. She's adapted remarkably well, Sarah observed. They all have. It's strange, the children seem to bring out protective instincts we didn't even know we had. Lieutenant Chen has started teaching them Earth games. Professor Kim is learning their mathematical concepts. Apparently they think in 11 dimensions naturally. A soft chime indicated an incoming message. Sarah activated her comm unit, and the voice of their communications officer, David Park, crackled through. Commander, we're receiving something from the perimeter sensors. It's unusual. Sarah and Elena exchanged glances. In the 3 weeks since the Kethmori had left, they'd received no word from the outside galaxy. The research station existed in a kind of protective bubble, isolated from the cosmic war raging somewhere beyond their sensors. On our way, Sarah replied. The communication center buzzed with activity. David Park hunched over a console that displayed energy patterns unlike anything in their databases. The readings pulsed with malevolent purpose, and even looking at them made Sarah's skin crawl. What are we looking at? She demanded. Something's probing our defenses, David explained. Not physical. It's more like someone running their fingers along the edge of our reality looking for weak spots. The Kethmori shielding is holding, but whatever's out there is persistent. As if summoned by their conversation, Veltar, one of the Kethmori caretakers, materialized beside them. The being's usual starlit composure was replaced by something that could only be described as anxiety. Hunters. Veltar's voice resonated in their minds. They have found us. Sarah's blood turned to ice. How long do we have? Unknown. The barriers your people call impossible will slow them but not stop them. They are persistent. What exactly are we dealing with? Elena asked. Your people never explained what the hunters actually are. Veltar's form flickered, as if the being was struggling with how to communicate something beyond human understanding. They are what happens when a species achieves perfect predation. They no longer hunt for survival, for resources, or even for conquest. They hunt because it is what they have become. They find the strongest, most dangerous species in the galaxy, and they... The being paused, its form dimming. They corrupt them, turn them into extensions of themselves. The children are always taken first, their minds are most adaptable. Within cycles, the young become perfect killers and the adults follow to save them. Entire civilizations become part of the hunt. Sarah felt her stomach drop. That's why the Kethmori came to us. They knew we'd never let that happen to children. Yes, your species is unique. You have faced extinction, conquered worlds, waged wars across systems, but you have never willingly harmed the young of another race. It is why we trust you with our most precious gift. The console behind them erupted in alarms. David's fingers flew across the displays as readings spiked beyond comprehension. They're not just probing anymore, he announced. Something's trying to break through the dimensional barriers. Through the station's speakers came a sound that made everyone freeze. It was beautiful and terrible, a harmony that promised peace while simultaneously threatening annihilation. But beneath the alien music, Sarah heard something that made her blood boil. Children's voices. Human children singing in languages they'd never learned, calling to the young Kethmori with words of friendship and safety. They're using human children as bait, she whispered. Not bait, Veltar corrected grimly. Weapons. The hunters have found human worlds. Your young have been changed. Elena grabbed Sarah's arm. The Kethmori children, are they safe? Before Veltar could answer, the station shuddered, not from impact, but from something far worse. Reality itself was being stretched, tested, probed for weaknesses. Commander, David called out, his voice tight with fear. I'm reading massive spatial distortions. Whatever shielding the Kethmori left us is starting to fail. Sarah's mind raced. They had 847 alien children aboard the station, 12 adult Kethmori caretakers, and a crew of 30 humans, against an enemy that had apparently already conquered human worlds and turned Earth's children into weapons. How long before they break through? She demanded. At the current rate of degradation? 6 hours, maybe less. Sarah stared at the tactical display showing the invisible forces pressing against their defenses. Every instinct screamed at her to evacuate, to run, to get the children to safety. But where could they run that the hunters wouldn't follow? Commander. Veltar's voice carried new urgency. There is something you must know. The reason the hunters seek our young is not just to convert them. Kethmori children in their developmental stage can rewrite the fundamental laws of reality. In the wrong hands, they become capable of unmaking existence itself. The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. The children they'd been protecting weren't just refugees. They were potentially the most dangerous weapons in the universe. And you brought them here, she said quietly. To humans. Because, Veltar replied. Among all the species we have encountered, only humans have consistently chosen to protect children rather than use them, even when it meant your own destruction. Another shudder ran through the station. The lights flickered, and for a moment Sarah saw through the walls, saw the cosmic forces pressing against their small bubble of safety like wolves circling a campfire. 6 hours, she repeated. Veltar, what happens if the hunters get the children? They hear. Galaxy ends, the being replied simply, and then they moved to the next one. Sarah looked around the communication center at her crew, humans who had volunteered for a simple research mission and found themselves responsible for the fate of existence itself. Then she thought of the alien children playing in the habitat modules, trusting them completely, and of the human children somewhere out there who had already been lost to the hunters. David, get me a channel to Earth Command. Elena, start evacuation protocols for non-essential personnel. And Veltar. She turned to the alien caretaker. Tell me everything about these hunters. Everything, because we're not running. Commander, we're going to fight, and we're going to win. The station shuddered again, and somewhere in the modified habitat modules, alien children played games of light and shadow, unaware that the fate of everything they'd ever known rested in the hands of the species that had never learned to abandon its young. Chapter 3. The Price of Protection, the Evacuation Transport. Prometheus, detached from Research Station Epsilon with a mechanical finality that echoed through the corridors. Commander Sarah Chen watched through the observation deck as the ship carrying her non-essential personnel disappeared into hyperspace, taking with it 22 crew members and her chief science officer's final argument that she was making. A suicidal mistake, she wasn't wrong. Sarah knew the odds were impossible, but as she turned from the window and saw young Kethmori floating through the corridors, their starlit forms dim with confusion and fear, she knew that impossible odds had never stopped humanity before. Status report, she called to the remaining crew scattered across the station's command center. Defensive systems are online, but honestly, Commander, they're designed for asteroid impacts and solar flares, not whatever this is, reported Lieutenant Chen, no relation despite the name, their weapons specialist. The Kethmori have provided us with some kind of reality anchor. It should prevent the hunters from phasing directly inside the station. Dr. Elena Martinez looked up from her xenobiology console. The children are scared, but they're responding to our caretaker's reassurance. Veltar and the other adults are doing something. I can feel it in the neural link. They're preparing for war. Sarah nodded. The station now held only essential personnel, 8 humans and 12 Kethmori adults, along with 847 alien children whose power could unmake reality itself if it fell into the wrong hands. David, what's our communication status with Earth Command? Communications Officer Park shook his head grimly. That's the problem, Commander. I finally got through to Fleet Admiral Morrison and the news isn't good. Sarah felt her stomach clench. How bad? 17 human colonies have gone dark in the past month. The last transmission from New Singapore was disturbing. Children's voices speaking in languages that shouldn't exist, calling for their parents to join the eternal hunt. Admiral Morrison is mobilizing every available ship, but she estimates they're at least 3 weeks out. We don't have 3 weeks, Sarah muttered. Through the station's enhanced sensors, she could see the space around them rippling like water disturbed by an unseen predator. We have maybe 3 hours before they break through. Veltar materialized beside her, the Kethmori's usual calm, replaced by something that could only be described as grim determination. Commander, we must speak privately. Sarah followed the being to a quiet section of the observation deck. Through the transparent aluminum, space itself seemed to be writhing, reality bending under forces that shouldn't exist. The situation is worse than we have told you, Veltar began. The hunters are not merely a species that consumes others. They are what remains of the first civilization to achieve perfect unity. Every individual consciousness merged into a single, eternal predator. They have consumed entire galaxies. Why are you telling me this now? Sarah demanded. Because we may ask you to do something that goes against every instinct of your species. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's temperature. What do you mean? If the hunters break through our defenses, if they begin to corrupt our children, there is only one way to prevent them from gaining access to reality-altering power. The implication hit Sarah like a physical blow. You're asking us to kill them, the children. We are asking you to save existence itself. Sarah stared at the alien being, her mind reeling. Everything humanity stood for, every principle that had made them worthy of the Kethmori's trust, would be violated in that moment of choice. There has to be another way, she whispered. Perhaps. But if there is not, will you be able to make the choice? Before Sarah could answer, alarms screamed through the station. David's voice crackled over the intercom. Commander, they're through. The outer barriers. Multiple contacts moving fast. Sarah raced back to the command center, Veltar flowing beside her like liquid starlight. The tactical display showed something that defied comprehension. Shapes that existed in too many dimensions, moving in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Where are they? She demanded. Everywhere. Lieutenant Chen replied, his voice tight with fear. They're not moving through space, they're moving through reality itself. Our sensors can't track them properly. Through the station's speakers came that terrible, beautiful harmony, the sound of the hunt approaching. But now Sarah could hear the individual voices within it, and her blood turned to ice. Children's voices. Human children singing in perfect unison, their words promising friendship and safety while their tone promised only death. They bring the converted young, Veltar explained. They know our children will be drawn to other children. It is how the corruption begins. How long before they reach the habitat modules? Sarah asked. At their current rate, maybe 10 minutes. Sarah's mind raced. 10 minutes to save 847 children who could reshape reality. 10 minutes to prevent the hunters from gaining power that could unravel existence itself. 10 minutes to find a solution that didn't require her to become the monster. Veltar, what happens if we separate the children? Scatter them throughout the station? It would slow the corruption, but not stop it. The hunters are patient. They will convert them, one by one. What about the reality anchors? Can we use them to create a barrier around the children? The anchors prevent dimensional intrusion, but not mental corruption. The moment the hunters make contact with our young, the process begins. Sarah slammed her fist against the console. There had to be a way. Humanity hadn't survived everything they'd faced by giving up when the odds were impossible. Commander, David called out urgently. I'm receiving a transmission. It's It's from the hunters. The sound that filled the command center wasn't quite language and wasn't quite music. It was deeper, older, and infinitely patient. But somehow, impossibly, Sarah understood it. We know you are there, little guardians. We know what you protect. Give us the children, and we will grant you the honor of joining the eternal hunt. Refuse, and we will take them anyway, and you will watch as they become what they were always meant to be. The transmission ended, leaving only the hum of life support and the sound of Sarah's hammering heart. Elena, she said quietly. How fast can the children adapt to new environments? They're incredibly adaptable, but why? Because we're not going to defend the station, Sarah announced. We're going to abandon it. The command center fell silent. Finally, Lieutenant Chen spoke. Commander, there's nowhere to run. They can track us through multiple dimensions. Who said anything about running? Sarah turned to Veltar. Your people can manipulate reality, right? Can you create a pocket dimension, something small, hidden, just big enough for the children? Theoretically, yes, but the energy required would leave us defenseless, and someone would need to remain outside to maintain the dimensional anchor, or the pocket would collapse. Sarah nodded slowly. The plan forming in her mind was desperate, probably suicidal, and definitely against every regulation in the book. But it was also the most human thing she could think of. Here's what we're going to do, she announced. Veltar, you and the other adults create the pocket dimension. Elena, you're going to help get the children inside. David, send a message to Earth Command, full tactical data on the hunters. Maybe Fleet Admiral Morrison can find a way to stop them. What about you, Commander? Elena asked. Sarah looked around at her crew, the 7 other humans who had volunteered to stay behind, knowing the odds. They were scientists, technicians, and communication specialists, not warriors. But they were human, and they had children to protect. We're going to buy you time, she said simply. The hunters want to convert the children slowly, savor the corruption. They won't expect us to fight back with everything we have. Commander. Veltar's voice carried new respect. You understand that this will likely mean your death. Probably, Sarah agreed. But that's what makes us human. We protect the children no matter the cost. Through the station's speakers, the hunting call of the converted human children grew louder, closer. Sarah looked out at the space around them, where reality itself was being rewritten by forces beyond comprehension. Somewhere out there, an enemy that had consumed galaxies was coming for the children under their protection. In 10 minutes, the battle for existence itself would begin. But first they had to hide 847 reality-bending alien children in a dimension that didn't exist yet, while fighting off cosmic predators with weapons designed for mining asteroids. Sarah smiled grimly. She'd had worse odds before. She just couldn't remember when. Or Chapter 4. The last stand, the pocket dimension shimmered into existence like a soap bubble made of crystallized starlight. Dr. Elena Martinez watched in fascination as 11 adult Kethmori wove reality itself into new patterns, their forms blazing with power that made the air around them sing with harmonics beyond human perception. It's beautiful, she whispered, watching as space folded in on itself to create a hiding place that existed between the spaces of existence. Beautiful and fragile, Veltar replied, the being's mental voice strained with effort. This anchor point will collapse if we all enter the pocket. Someone must remain outside to maintain the dimensional stability. Commander Sarah Chen understood the implication immediately. How many need to stay? 1 Kethmori. And someone who can understand our harmonic frequencies. Someone with the neural modifications. Sarah felt her stomach drop. Elena had the strongest neural link to the Kethmori of all the humans aboard the station. She was also their chief xenobiologist, the person most qualified to care for alien children in an isolated pocket dimension. Elena, Sarah said quietly, you know what this means. Elena nodded, her face pale but determined. I stay outside. With one of the Kethmori, we hold the anchor while the children hide. I will remain, Veltar announced. It is my duty as their guardian. Through the station's hull, they could hear the approaching storm. The hunter's call had grown from distant music to a thunderous harmony that made the metal walls vibrate. Worse, the corrupted voices of human children were getting clearer, more distinct. Sarah could almost make out words in languages that shouldn't exist. "How long do we have?" she demanded. Lieutenant Chen checked his tactical display. "They're breaching the outer hull. Maybe 5 minutes before they reach the habitat modules." "Move! Move! Move!" Sarah shouted. The evacuation began with desperate efficiency. Young Kethamori flowed through the corridors like living starlight, their caretakers guiding them toward the pocket dimension with urgent harmonics that resonated in every human's bones. The children seemed to understand the gravity of the situation, their usual playful nature replaced by an eerie quiet that made Sarah's heart ache. "Commander," David Park's voice crackled through the intercom. "I'm receiving multiple transmissions from the hunters. They're using human communication protocols now." Sarah's blood ran cold. "Put it through." The voice that filled the station was that of a young girl, maybe 8 years old, speaking perfect English with a slight accent that suggested she might have been from the New Singapore colony. "Hello, station people. We know you have friends inside. New friends who can play amazing games. We just want to play too. Won't you let us in?" The innocence in the voice was perfect, heartbreaking, and absolutely terrifying. "They have learned to mimic your young," Veltar explained. "This is how they gained access to your colonies. They corrupt one child, then use them to call others." "Elena, how's our progress?" Sarah demanded. 600 in the pocket dimension so far," Elena replied, sweat beading on her forehead as she helped guide frightened Kethmori children toward safety. "The older ones are helping the younger ones adapt to the dimensional shift." Another voice joined the first through the station's speakers, a boy this time, maybe 10 years old. "We have games from Earth, remember hide and seek? We can play hide and seek forever and ever, your friends would love it. Please let us in?" Sarah felt sick. These had been real children once, real human children with parents and dreams and favorite toys. Now they were weapons, perfectly designed to exploit humanity's protective instincts. 2 minutes, Lieutenant Chen announced. "They're cutting through the hull plating." "Commander." Veltar's voice carried new urgency. "The remaining children must enter the pocket now. The dimensional anchor cannot be maintained much longer with this many of us outside." "How many left?" Sarah asked. 57, Elena reported. "The youngest ones are scared. They don't want to leave their caretakers." Sarah watched as the last group of young Kethmori huddled near the pocket dimension's entrance, their star-flecked forms dim with fear. They were so small, so fragile-looking, despite their reality-bending abilities. "Can we speed up the process?" she demanded. "No. Too much force could collapse the dimensional anchor. They must enter willingly, or the pocket will reject them." The station shuddered as something massive impacted the outer hull. Through the hull's transparent sections, Sarah could see shapes moving, things that existed in too many dimensions at once, accompanied by smaller figures that moved with the innocent. "Skip of children at play. 43 left," Elena announced. "Come on, little ones, it's safe inside, your friends are waiting." But the youngest Kethmori weren't listening. They were staring at the hull sections where the hunters were cutting through, their forms flickering between dimensions in response to their fear. Then Sarah heard it, a sound that made her blood freeze. Through the station's speakers came the voice of a human child, maybe 5 years old, singing a lullaby in a language that predated human civilization. "They are calling to our young directly," Veltar explained, his form blazing with alarm. "The corruption begins with trust. They make the children want to come to them. Elena, get those children in the pocket now, I'm trying, they're not responding to..." The hull section exploded inward. The thing that entered wasn't quite solid and wasn't quite energy. It flowed through the breach like liquid shadow, bringing with it a cold that had nothing to do with temperature. Behind it came smaller figures, human children, their faces bright with innocent smiles, their eyes holding depths that belonged to creatures older than stars. "Hello," one of them called out cheerfully, a girl with pigtails and a dress that might have been from a colony world. "We're here to play. Where are your new friends?" Sarah stepped forward, placing herself between the intruders and the remaining Kethmori children. "You're not welcome here." The little girl tilted her head with perfect, terrible innocence. "But we just want to play. Look, we brought toys." She held up something that might have been a doll but seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Just looking at it made Sarah's eyes water and her mind reel. "Don't look at it," Elena shouted. "It's a reality anchor. They're using it to—" The girl's smile never wavered as she gently tossed the toy toward the group of young Kethmori. The moment it landed near them, their forms began to change. Their usual starlight patterns started to pulse with darker rhythms, and their innocent confusion was replaced by something hungry. "The corruption has begun," Veltar announced, his mental voice filled with anguish. "Once it starts, it spreads exponentially." Sarah watched in horror as 3 of the youngest Kethmori began moving toward the human children, their forms shifting into patterns that hurt to perceive directly. In moments, they would be lost. In hours, they would become weapons capable of unraveling reality itself. "Elena, get the rest into the pocket, now." "I can't. The contaminated ones will spread it to the others." Sarah looked around desperately. 7 human crew members, 1 Kethmori adult and 43 alien children, 3 of whom were already being corrupted by an enemy that had consumed galaxies. The choice Veltar had warned her about was here. Save the many by sacrificing the few. Protect existence by becoming the monster. But as Sarah stared at the corrupted children, both human and Kethmori, she suddenly understood something that had been nagging at her since the hunters first arrived. "They're still children," she whispered. "Commander, we do not have time for— no, listen. Look at them. The human children. They're not adult hunters. They're still children who've been corrupted. And the Kethmori." She watched as the 3 affected youngsters moved toward their human counterparts. "They're not becoming predators. They're becoming prey." Elena's eyes widened with understanding. The corruption doesn't make them into hunters. It makes them into bait. Perfect bait that other children can't resist. Sarah felt a plan forming. Desperate, probably impossible, but unmistakably human in its refusal to abandon the innocent. "Veltar, can you reverse the corruption if we separate them from the source?" "Theoretically, but—" "Elena, can you isolate the affected children in a separate pocket dimension?" "Maybe, but it would take all my concentration and someone would need to—" "I'll handle the hunters," Sarah announced, grabbing a pulse rifle from the emergency locker. The corrupted human girl looked up at her with those terrible, innocent eyes. "You don't want to hurt us, do you? We're just children." Sarah aimed the rifle at the thing that had once been a little girl from New Singapore. "You're right. I don't want to hurt you. But I will if it means saving the others." The girl's smile never wavered. "But we're children. Humans never hurt children. It's what makes you special." "You're also weapons," Sarah replied steadily. "And I'm a soldier." She fired. The pulse blast struck the corrupted child, and for a moment Sarah thought she'd made a terrible mistake. But instead of falling, the girl's form began to shift. The terrible depth in her eyes flickered, and for just an instant Sarah saw something else. Confusion, fear, and underneath it all, the mind of a real child trapped in a cosmic nightmare. "Help me," the girl whispered, her voice breaking with genuine terror before the corruption reasserted itself. Sarah's heart nearly shattered, but she held her aim steady. "Elena, did you see that? The pulse rifle. It's disrupting whatever's controlling them." Elena's voice carried new hope. "If we can hit all the corrupted ones simultaneously—" "It will not work," Veltar interrupted grimly. "Behind them comes the true hunter. The children are merely its extensions." As if summoned by his words, the breach in the hull expanded. What emerged wasn't a being so much as an absence. A hole in reality shaped like something that had once been alive. It flowed into the station like liquid darkness, bringing with it a cold that reached into Sarah's bones and whispered of the death of stars. The corrupted children turned toward it with perfect synchronization, their innocent faces bright with adoration. "Father's here," they said in unison. "Now we can all play together forever." Sarah felt her rifle grow heavy in her hands. How do you fight something that existed in dimensions your mind couldn't even perceive? How do you kill death itself? You cannot. The hunter spoke directly into their minds, its voice carrying the weight of consumed galaxies. But you need not try. Join us willingly, and your death will be gentle. Your children will become perfect hunters, and your species will know eternal purpose. Elena. Status on the pocket dimension. 37 children safe inside. The corrupted ones are blocked from entering, but I can't maintain the separation much longer. Sarah watched as the 3 affected Kethmori children moved closer to their human counterparts. With each step, their corruption deepened. Soon they would be beyond saving, and worse, they would become the perfect bait to draw out the children hidden in the pocket dimension. The hunter flowed closer, its presence making the air itself seem to die. Your species interests us, humans. In all our consumption, we have never encountered a race that refuses to sacrifice its young for survival. We will enjoy learning what breaks first, your principles or your sanity. Commander, Lieutenant. Chen's voice crackled through the intercom. Emergency power is failing. Whatever that thing is, it's draining our energy systems just by being here. Sarah felt desperation clawing at her throat. 7 humans and 1 Kethmori against a cosmic predator that had devoured civilizations. Children, both human and alien, trapped between salvation and corruption. And somewhere in the pocket dimension, 847 young beings whose power could reshape reality itself, waiting for adults who might already be dead. But as Sarah stared at the hunter's terrible non-form, she realized something that sent a chill of hope through her veins. "It's not trying to kill us," she announced suddenly. Elena looked at her as if she'd lost her mind. "What?" "Look at its behavior. It could have destroyed us the moment it arrived, but it didn't. It's playing with us, savoring the moment." Sarah's grip tightened on her rifle. "It feeds on corruption, no. Death. It wants to watch us break our own principles." Clever little guardian, the hunter purred in their minds. "Yes, we prefer our prey to season slowly. Desperation adds such flavor to the final capitulation." "Then you made a mistake," Sarah replied, raising her weapon. "You're dealing with humans. We're too stubborn to break and too stupid to know when we're beaten." She opened fire on the hunter itself. The pulse blasts passed through its form without effect, but something unexpected happened. The corrupted children stumbled, their synchronization broken for just a moment. In that instant of disruption, Sarah saw their true faces, terrified children from a dozen human colonies trapped inside their own bodies while something else pulled their strings. "Elena, the connection flows both ways. If we can disrupt the hunter, the children might break free." Elena's eyes blazed with understanding. "But I need more power than a pulse rifle can provide." The dimensional anchor, Veltar's mental voice carried sudden hope. "If we collapse it in a controlled manner, the energy release could sever the hunter's connection to its puppets." Sarah felt her heart stop. That would trap the children in the pocket dimension forever. Or free the Yowa, corrupted ones, and give us a chance to save them all. The choice was impossible. Trap 837 innocent children in a pocket dimension to save 6 corrupted ones, or risk losing everyone to a predator that could unmake existence itself. "How long do we have to decide?" Sarah demanded. "The pocket dimension is destabilizing," Elena reported, sweat pouring down her face as she fought to maintain the dimensional anchor. "Maybe 2 minutes before it collapses anyway." Sarah looked around the command center at her crew. David Park was still trying to boost their communication. Array, desperate to get word to Earth Command. Lieutenant Chen was coordinating their failing defensive systems. Dr. Martinez was holding together a pocket dimension with pure willpower and scientific stubbornness. And somewhere in that impossible space between realities, 837 children waited for the adults they trusted to find a way to save them. "The time for choice approaches," Veltar announced. "Commander, what are your orders?" Sarah stared at the hunter, at the corrupted children it controlled, at the flickering entrance to a pocket dimension that held the future of existence itself. Every option led to sacrifice. Every choice demanded that someone be left behind. But that was nothing new for humanity. "Elena, prepare to collapse the dimensional anchor on my mark. Veltar, the moment it starts, pour everything you have into breaking the hunter's connection to the children. David, send one final message to Earth Command. Full tactical data on everything we've learned." "What about the children in the pocket dimension?" Elena asked. Sarah smiled grimly. "We're going to do something the hunters don't expect. We're going to trust them." "Commander, Kethmori children can manipulate reality itself, right? Well, once they're free from our anchor, they'll have to maintain their own pocket dimension, or be expelled back into normal space. Either they'll figure out how to save themselves or they'll come back to help us fight." The hunters' laughter filled their minds like the sound of dying stars. "Foolish little guardian. You would stake existence itself on the untrained abilities of children?" "Every day," Sarah replied without hesitation. "That's what makes us human." She raised her hand, ready to give the signal that would either save everyone or doom the galaxy. "Elena, now." The dimensional anchor collapsed in a cascade of crystalline fire. Reality twisted, space folded in on itself, and for one impossible moment, Sarah existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously. She saw the true scope of the hunter, a cosmic predator that stretched across light years, connected to thousands of corrupted children throughout the galaxy. She also saw the pocket dimension, not as a hiding place, but as a classroom where 37 young beings with reality-bending powers had been learning from each other, growing stronger, waiting for the moment when they would be needed most. The corrupted children screamed as the hunter's connection to them shattered. For a brief instant they were free, confused, terrified, but themselves again. Then the hunter began to reassert control, its influence flowing back like a tide of liquid darkness. That's when the cavalry arrived. They came through rifts in space itself, 837 young Kethmori, their forms blazing with coordinated power. They had learned to work together in their pocket dimension, combining their individual abilities into something that made even the hunter pause. "We heard you calling." Their collective voice resonated through the station. "We came to help." The battle that followed couldn't be described in 3 dimensions. Reality became fluid as young beings who thought in 11 dimensions rewrote the laws of physics around them. The hunter fought back with the power of consumed galaxies. But it was facing something it hadn't encountered before. Children who refused to be afraid, backed by adults who refused to abandon them. Sarah watched in awe as human children and Kethmori children worked together, the corrupted ones slowly breaking free as their alien friends literally rewrote the hunter's influence out of existence. Elena coordinated the effort with scientific precision, while Veltar provided harmonic guidance that helped the young Kethmori focus their reality-bending abilities. The hunter began to retreat, its form growing less solid as its connection to its puppets continued to break down. "This is not over," it promised as it withdrew. "There are others of your kind scattered across the galaxy. We will find them. We will corrupt them. And through them, we will return." "Maybe," Sarah admitted, watching as the last traces of the predator faded from their reality. "But when you do, we'll be ready. And next time, we won't be alone." Through the station's communication array, David's voice carried new hope. "Commander, I'm receiving transmissions from Earth Command. Admiral Morrison's fleet is 3 hours out and they're not alone. I'm reading Kethmori energy signatures, big ones." Sarah smiled as she watched human and alien children playing together in the corridors, their laughter echoing through the station that had become an unlikely sanctuary. The corrupted children were slowly recovering, their memories returning as the hunter's influence faded. "The war's not over," she announced to her crew. "But we've won something more important than a battle. We've proven that some things are worth fighting for, no matter the odds. And we have learned," Veltar added, "why the most dangerous species in the galaxy trust humans with their young. Sarah looked out at the stars, knowing that somewhere in the darkness, the hunters were regrouping, planning their next assault. But she also knew that when they came again, they would face something unprecedented, a galaxy united not by conquest or fear, but by the simple principle that children, all children, deserved protection. It was going to be one hell of a war. But then again, humanity had never backed down from impossible odds before. Epilogue. The lesson. 6 months later, Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching as the combined human Kethmori fleet prepared for departure. The war against the hunters had spread across 17 sectors, and every day brought new challenges, new horrors, and new victories won at impossible cost. But also, new hope. "Status report," she requested from her aide, Commander Torres. "Fourth Fleet is reporting successful liberation of the Centauri colonies. The hunters' corruption was broken, and we've recovered approximately 12,000 children, both human and from 6 different species. Medical teams report full recovery expected for 97% of them." Morrison nodded, still amazed by how quickly the galaxy had united once word spread about what had happened at Research Station Epsilon. Species that had never spoken to each other were sharing resources and intelligence. Ancient enemies were fighting side by side, all because a small group of humans had refused to abandon alien children when it would have been easier and safer to run. And the Kethmori integration? Beyond our wildest projections, Admiral. Their children are adapting to multi-species environments faster than we thought possible. The human Kethmori mixed units are reporting tactical capabilities that... Torres paused, still incredulous at the reports. "Ma'am, they're literally rewriting the laws of physics in real time to counter hunter attacks." Through the bridge's viewports, Morrison could see one of the new hybrid ships, vessels that existed partially in normal space and partially in dimensions that human science was only beginning to understand. Aboard each ship, human adults worked, alongside Kethmori caretakers, to protect and nurture children from dozens of species, all of whom had been rescued from hunter corruption. "Ma'am," the communications officer interrupted. "Incoming message from Research Station Epsilon." "It's..." Commander Chen put her through. Sarah Chen's image appeared on the main screen, and Morrison was struck by how much the woman had changed. There was a weight in her eyes now, the look of someone who had stared into the abyss and decided to build a lighthouse instead of turning away. "Admiral Morrison," Sarah began, "I wanted to give you our final report before we depart for the Outer Rim sectors." "Go ahead, Commander." "The station's conversion to a mobile sanctuary is complete. We're now housing 1,147 children from 12 species, with a mixed crew of 63 humans and 31 Kethmori adults. Our mission parameters remain unchanged. Find corrupted children, break the hunter's influence, and provide safe harbor for any young beings displaced by the war." Morrison felt a surge of pride. Research Station Epsilon had become something unique in galactic history. A completely mobile facility dedicated to child rescue and rehabilitation, crewed by volunteers from multiple species who had one thing in common: they refused to let children suffer for adult conflicts. "Any final request for supplies or personnel?" Morrison asked. Sarah smiled, the first genuine smile Morrison had seen from her in months. "Just one thing, Admiral. Keep doing what humanity does best." "Which is?" "Proving that the impossible is just another word for hasn't been tried yet." The transmission ended, and Morrison watched as Research Station Epsilon, now equipped with hybrid human Kethmori technology that allowed it to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, began its journey toward the Galactic Rim, where the war raged hottest and children needed protection most. "Admiral," Commander Torres said quietly, "the xenopsychology teams have finished their analysis of why the Kethmori chose to trust us with their children. Would you like to see their conclusions?" Morrison nodded, curious despite herself. Torres activated a holographic display showing comparative data from thousands of species across galactic history. It turns out it wasn't just that humans have never harmed another species' children, though that was part of it. The Kethamori studied our behavioral patterns for over a century. Before making contact, the display shifted to show human expansion across the galaxy. Every war, every conflict, every moment when humanity had faced extinction and somehow survived. In every case where humans encountered children in danger, regardless of species, regardless of whether those children belonged to allies or enemies, we protected them. Even when it cost us strategically, even when it meant our own children might suffer. The Kethamori concluded that humans have a biological imperative that overrides survival instincts when children are involved. Morrison studied the data, thinking of all the battles they'd fought, all the impossible odds they'd overcome. And the other species? None of them showed the same pattern? Some came close. The Altarians would protect children of allied species. The Vegan Confederacy would sometimes spare enemy young if it didn't compromise their objectives. But humans... Torres paused, as if still processing the implications. Humans are the only species that consistently chooses the protection of any child over our own strategic advantage, even over our own survival. Morrison looked out at the stars, where human and alien ships flew together against an enemy that had consumed galaxies. She thought of Sarah Chen and her crew, heading into the most dangerous sectors of space because that's where children needed help most. She thought of the thousands of volunteers who had signed up for sanctuary ship duty, knowing the odds were against ever seeing home again. Commander Torres, she said finally, what does the analysis conclude about our chances in this war? Honestly, Admiral, if we were fighting for territory, resources, or even survival, we'd lose. The hunters have consumed too many civilizations, corrupted too many species. They have advantages we can't match. Morrison felt her heart sink, but Torres continued. But we're not fighting for territory or resources. We're fighting for children. And according to every psychological model, every historical analysis, every predictive algorithm, Torres smiled. Humans don't lose when children are at stake. We can't. It's literally not in our nature. Morrison nodded slowly. Outside, another hybrid ship prepared for departure, one of hundreds now patrolling the galaxy, each crewed by beings who had learned that some things were worth any sacrifice. The hunters had made a mistake when they chose to corrupt children. They had awakened something in humanity that even they couldn't understand, a refusal to abandon the innocent that transcended logic, strategy, and self-preservation. It was going to be a long war, a hard war, a war that would cost more than any species should have to pay. But looking out at the combined fleet, at ships filled with rescued children from a dozen worlds, at crews that included former enemies united by a common cause, Morrison knew something the hunters didn't. They had already lost. They just didn't know it yet, because they were fighting the one species in the galaxy that would never, ever abandon its young. And now, thanks to the Kethamori's trust and the bonds forged in the crucible of Research Station Epsilon, humanity wasn't alone in that fight anymore. The most dangerous species in the galaxy had found their perfect partners, the most protective species in the galaxy. Together, they would prove that some bonds couldn't be broken, some principles couldn't be corrupted, and some fights were worth everything, even if it meant facing the end of everything to protect the beginning of everyone. The war continues. The children are safe. And somewhere in the vast darkness between the stars, hope travels at the speed of light aboard ships crewed by beings who learned that the strongest force in the universe isn't gravity or nuclear fire or the power to reshape reality itself. It's the simple, stubborn, utterly human refusal to let the innocent suffer alone. And that, perhaps, is why the most dangerous species trusts humans with their young.